welcome back to another one of our privacy streams with Study GRC. And so it's me, Chris Whitlock, and we got Dwight Turner here. And we just, every single week at 11 a.m. Central on Tuesdays, we go through and we just present some different ideas and topics, discussion around the privacy realm, and relate that back to GRC in one aspect, and really just try to make it friendly for, all people of the audience. And so today we're actually going to backtrack a little bit because we've covered quite a bit already and used a lot of different terms so far. And we just wanted to kind of go over some of the privacy 101 keywords and different things you'll come across as well. Let me go ahead and get this presentation pulled up for us here. And then here we go. So this first one, consent.
All right. We talked about a whole episode on consent. We wanted to start here because we just want everybody to have a good foundation on this. Again, freely given, specific, informed, unambiguous. If you're jumping into privacy, if you're going to be taking any of those privacy exams, you definitely want to try to commit those 4 characteristics to memory. We also talked a little bit about consent being revocable in that consent episode, so keep that in mind. But this is an idea that is more complicated than it seems, especially when in terms of using consent as a lawful basis for processing, because of its revocable nature, because some people may not be fully informed, because they're just clicking through on things. So we're always sort of debating, the value. The real value of consent. But at the moment, it is a pretty powerful way to indicate that we agree with the processing of data. So you definitely want to know this term. You definitely want to be comfortable defining it. And you definitely want to evaluate, especially again, we're at first episode of the new year. We want to be evaluating what all we've given consent to, and where we want to sort of shore up on. Like maybe I don't want to subscribe to so many things. Maybe I don't want to be given my app data, location data, even for things that we consent to using on a daily basis.
We have a whole video about consent as well that we talked about. And so this next one here is a data processor and data controller. And so this is a pretty interesting one. So the entity that determines the purpose is the data controller. So the purpose of the data processing of personal data. And then data processor is the entity that is actually processing that personal data on behalf of the data controller. And this is where you get those different terms for title and who's responsible for what. It's kind of like the risk matrix for the cloud and so forth. You're identifying whose duties is what, especially when it comes to that responsibility.
Yeah, we talked about this briefly when we, in terms of getting into the GDPR and all of the different terms and details there, but this is really some basic knowledge. You try to define these pretty simply, and you're going to want to be able to look at a scenario and differentiate who is controlling that data based on who is the controller, who is the processor. And then we also have a term that's not on here, the data subject, the person of interest in a particular piece of data. But you want to know those because it's really going to determine who's responsible for certain aspects of that GDPR compliance.
Yeah, and then here we also have data minimization, which is a great topic. It's probably one of my favorites here. Did you want to touch on this one?
Data minimization, I always, point it out and juxtapose it with data retention, because as security folks, we know data retention, but we don't know so much about minimization, but basically shrinking down our data to what is absolutely necessary. I think where you see this becoming a crucial issue are in some of our, for example, wiretapping laws, where the government might get a subpoena to record someone in a certain situation. Well, then they also have to have, someone that sits there and kind of focuses in on, they might have recorded whatever phone conversation and picked up some other people that were not the targets of that investigation. Well, they can't include that. It won't be admissible in court. And so someone goes through and they remove that, and they kind of focus in exactly on what's in focus there. So data minimization is a compliance issue, but also just in terms of making sure we're reducing our risk for breaches and other things as well.
And one of the things I want to shout out too is that is mentioned in the GDPR as well. and I believe it's in the CCPA. This next one, purpose limitation. So purpose limitation, use personal data only for the purposes for which it was originally collected. And this also goes back to like consent and kind of really closely relates to it as well, because you also have to go back and, ask for approval or things for some of it too, based on regulation.
I consented to giving you my data to be able to use your app to track my heart rate, while I'm exercising. I did not consent for you to use that same data now that you have this new AI tool and you're trying to train it and upsell something new to me. So you're supposed to come back to me and get my, consent again. So here we see purpose limitation is supposed to guide us in terms, what exactly a company is doing with our data. And it's one of those things that you're going to want to kind of laser focus in on when, like you of course you don't have time to fully read all the terms in a privacy notice, but when we talk about privacy notices in the future and we're looking at some of these big apps that we use pretty frequently, when we do open those policies, that we want to kind of zoom into what is the purpose of this data collection.
And then here's another one. So legitimate interest. That sounds very legalese.
Oh no, it's all ugly here.
Yeah. So legitimate interest. Did you want to cover a little bit about?
Sure. I'll first read it in case anybody's having trouble with that, because I know it's not displaying right. A legal basis for processing personal data requiring a balance between the organization's interests and individual rights. So you as a company have to have, you can't just say, I want to do this, to make my product better, if what you're doing infringes on people's rights. Like, I want to record all of Chris's data, just knowing everything he's doing all day is going to make my app so much better. Once I'm infringing on somebody's right, you have to come back and we have to balance that. Like, it's not realistic to record everything Chris is doing. I only need to be able to record what he's doing when he's in the app, so that I can make some of the features of the app better. And so that is a legitimate interest. So, but you have to be, as the privacy person or the GRC person with the privacy responsibilities, you have to be able to weigh those things, especially as we get some of these new state privacy laws that are really heavily influenced by the GDPR.
And then we also have the right to be forgotten, which is another really important one in the space. So an individual's right to have their personal data deleted under certain circumstances focuses on individual control. And so this gives you like the ability to say, hey, I want you to delete my data. You see on a lot of these different services where you have like the right to go through and request your data. Well, there's a lot of stuff in the space too for the right to be forgotten, where I don't want you to have access to my data any longer, and I want to be forgotten from your system, your platform, whatever it is. This also coincides with a couple other things really closely too, such as like the right to modify your information.
Yeah, this is one that is going to come back again and again, because it used to be a thing where companies could say, well, in the US, we don't have to acknowledge the right to be forgotten, or the right to erasure, as sometimes it's called, except for California residents. But now, as we see these new state laws, the majority of them are including the right to be forgotten as well. There are a few that don't, but all of a sudden, companies all over the US have to comply with these requests, as long as there's not like a legal justification or some sort of safety issue that companies need to hold on to that.
And then data subject access requests, a DC.
So when we see those rights, such as the right to correct, the right to be forgotten, anytime you request the company to even the right to access to view that data, to correct it, to have it removed, all of those things are going to be called a DSAR, data subject access request. And this is one of the big responsibilities, especially for some of the entry-level opening privacy roles, handling these types of requests. And we've seen in the past couple of years where these new laws have come out, that these requests are just skyrocketing, and it's also been pushed by apps that come in and sort of audit your ability to be able to go to these companies and have you request having your data removed.
And then we also have profiling
with the big G.
Yeah, profiling with the big G. So the automated processing of personal data to evaluate certain personal aspects, such as a person's preferences, interests, or behavior, focuses on potential biases and discrimination. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't seem to realize, that these are tactics. The profiling aspect is massive especially in the advertising space. So if you ever go to, actually make an ad on the internet, you can go through and you could select the age, the sex, you can select their interests, what they're, oh, are they typically browsing, at 6 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock and so that's a lot of the different stuff that's collected, and that's where profiling comes.
This is definitely kind of where we see the merging of what is sometimes a civil rights issue with privacy, with AI, with all of these other aspects. So for sure, this is going to be a hot topic in 2025. We will definitely have episodes where we're talking about AI governance, or we're talking about cases where AI has been used to deny folks. I think of a few hot topic cases right off the top of my head, but start this one because profiling and topics like bias, they seem like some sort of mundane topics that we hear about in our everyday lives, but when we come back and we see how they're being superpowered by AI and these other tools, we're really going to have to come back, discuss and debate and sort of fight for our privacy rights in terms of where the future is going with our.
And then data governance, that's a big thing in the GRC space too. Yeah, we've heard that before. So data governance,
This one, there are roles specific to data governance, and it's typically someone that is used to manipulating data and cleaning up data, who looks at where all the different types of data you may have in the cloud and everywhere, and trying to make sure that you can do what you need to do with it. But that that is an issue for compliance, that is an issue for security, and now we see that is an issue for privacy, because we need to be able to have the powers to come in and say, oh, so and so has requested their data removed. We needed to remove it from everywhere. If we're gonna really comply with with all these new incoming laws. So this is definitely an issue. This is an issue, everything from state laws to things like consent management, where you are opting in and out of the websites that you go to when you get these pop-ups. So expect this one to come back. Sorry, it's jumbled on the screen for everybody, but we really wanted to just get these topics up to you. We'll have a slide where a slideshow, like Chris will share the link to the slideshow without all the jumbled text. One more here, privacy by design.
Yep. So privacy by design, incorporating privacy into the design and development of systems and processes from the out. So when you start to build a platform or a service, or start, something along those lines, or a business, you think and implement privacy, at the get-go in the development process.
Yeah, and like we talked about with data governance, it is definitely easy to doing those things from the beginning. If you're in a new company, if you're in a startup, it's easy to sort of navigate to figure out where your data is, and put some controls in place, and make sure you're monitoring and managing it in a good way, and making sure it's accurate and all of that. But when you come into a company and these are your responsibilities, it's difficult to all of a sudden come to your product team and say, here's some things you need to with every new product. Or it's difficult to go to your data guys, and say, hey, all of a sudden we need to be able to comply with these laws. So you want to be able to grease the wheels on those relationships, and you're going to want to be familiar with privacy by design. This is a simple definition, but privacy by design is almost like a framework. It's got a list of different principles that go along with, as a privacy professional and GRC. When privacy comes up on your to-do list, you're going to want to know this as well as.
Yeah, and so that's kind of concludes some of the keywords that we were going to go through today. And thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you again next week. If you guys have any particular questions, definitely drop those in the chat. You can also put it in comments. We'll also put down the link for our Discord server as well. We have a privacy chat in our Discord. It's really like the best place outside of the streams to communicate with the community. And we look forward to any comments, suggestions, or otherwise. There's so many other topics we could go through, a lot of different words and lingo in the industry. This to get started on it. And if you guys have any particular ones you want to add, definitely drop those. We'll see you guys.
All right, y'all. See y'all next week.